A group of racist bullies tries to drown a black teen at the pool, completely unaware he's a martial arts master. They thought he was just an easy target. But their cruel prank unleashes a shocking secret that flips their twisted game upside down as the water churns with rage and fear. The teen's hidden skills explode in a moment of pure, unstoppable power, forcing everyone watching to question everything they thought they knew. But when the bully's powerful parents step in to silence the truth, the stakes skyrocket from a fight at the pool to a battle for survival. Can the teen prove what really happened before he loses everything? Or will the lies of the powerful drown him for good? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The afternoon sun blazed overhead at the Orchard Community Pool, turning the water into a sheet of sparkling diamonds. Ezra Jones sat alone on a worn plastic chair, his swim trunks still dry despite the sweltering heat. His dark eyes moved carefully across the scene before him, taking in the squealing children, the watchful parents, and the teenagers showing off their diving skills. A family walked past him, and the mother pulled her young daughter closer, clutching her beach bag tighter. Ezra pretended not to notice. He'd seen that same reaction too many times since moving here 3 months ago. The chlorine smell mixed with sunscreen in the air as he watched a group of kids playing Marco Polo. Their laughter echoed off the concrete, reminding him of easier days at his old neighborhood pool. Back there, he hadn't been the only black face in the crowd. Back there, he hadn't felt like every move he made was being watched. Ezra adjusted the plain white t-shirt he wore over his swim trunks, his fingers brushing against the lean muscle underneath, a testament to years of disciplined training with his grandfather. The memory of those early morning sessions in their backyard dojo brought a slight smile to his face. His grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "Stay aware of your surroundings, but never let them see your fear." An elderly black lifeguard, Mr. Caleb, according to his name tag, caught Ezra's eye from his elevated chair and gave him a small nod. Ezra returned it, grateful for even that tiny acknowledgement. It was the first friendly gesture he'd received since arriving at the pool 30 minutes ago. The afternoon crowd had started to thin out as the sun moved lower in the sky. Families packed up their coolers and towels, heading home for dinner. Ezra checked his phone. No messages from his mom. She was probably still at her second job and wouldn't be done until late tonight. He told her he was going to the pool to cool off, but really, he just needed to get out of their small apartment, away from the graffiti someone had sprayed on their door last week. A splash of water hit his feet, and he looked up to see a young boy apologizing as he chased after his beach ball. The kid's face changed when he saw Ezra, uncertainty replacing his friendly expression. Before Ezra could say anything, a woman's sharp voice cut through the air. "Tommy, come here right now." The boy scampered away, leaving his ball behind. Ezra picked it up, but the mother was already hurrying her son toward the exit, not even looking back for the forgotten toy. He set it aside with a quiet sigh. The remaining crowd had shifted, creating a subtle but noticeable empty space around his chair. Ezra had gotten good at spotting these patterns, the way people moved away without making it obvious, the careful way they avoided eye contact. His grandfather had taught him about this, too, about keeping his dignity even when others tried to strip it away. He stood up, stretching his tall frame, and walked to the edge of the pool. The water looked inviting, promising relief from both the heat and the weight of all those stairs. Maybe he should just dive in, show everyone he was just here to swim like anybody else. That's when he heard them. Loud laughter, the kind that carried threat beneath its surface, came from behind him. Ezra didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He'd heard about Blake Turner and his friends, had seen them in the school hallways during his first week before summer break started. "Well, look who decided to crash our pool!" Blake's voice rang out, full of mock surprise. "Didn't know they let just anybody in here these days." Ezra kept his breathing steady, just like his grandfather had taught him. He turned slowly, facing the three white teens who had formed a loose semicircle around him. Blake stood in the center, his blonde hair slicked back and a cruel smile playing on his lips. To his left was Kevin Peterson, tall and lanky, trying to match Blake's sneer but not quite managing it. Miles Cooper completed the trio on the right, his massive arms crossed over his chest, looking like he was just waiting for an excuse to use them. "You lost, boy?" Blake took a step closer, his voice dripping with fake concern. "The public pool's on the other side of town. This here's members only." "I have a membership," Ezra said quietly, keeping his voice level. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. "Control your emotions or they will control you." Kevin let out a forced laugh. "Hear that, Blake? He's got a membership. Bet his welfare check covered that real nice." Miles cracked his knuckles, moving to block Ezra's path back to his chair. "Maybe we should check his papers, make sure everything's legit." Ezra felt his muscles tensing, ready to react, but he kept his posture relaxed. He'd faced bullies before, knew how they operated. They were like wolves, always testing for weakness, looking for fear to exploit. Blake circled closer, his expensive swim shorts dripping water onto the concrete. "You know, some of the ladies were complaining earlier," Blake sneered. "Said they felt uncomfortable with certain people watching their kids swim." He emphasized certain people with a smirk that made his meaning crystal clear. The few remaining pool-goers were pretending not to notice what was happening, suddenly very interested in their phones or gathering their belongings. Even the younger lifeguard on duty seemed to be deliberately looking the other way, though Mr. Caleb was watching intently from his post, his hand hovering near his whistle. "I'm just here to swim," Ezra said, taking a careful step back from the edge of the pool. He knew better than to let them box him in against the water. "Oh, you want to swim?" Blake's voice rose, making sure others could hear. "We're just trying to be friendly here, show you around our pool. Right, boys?" Kevin and Miles moved in closer, their feet shuffling forward on the wet concrete. The three of them had formed a tighter circle now, like sharks closing in on prey. But Ezra wasn't prey, and he wasn't going to let them see him sweat. His grandfather had taught him better than that. "What's wrong?" Blake taunted, his voice thick with mock hurt. "Don't want to make new friends, and here we are, being so welcoming and all." The attack came without warning. One moment Ezra was standing his ground. The next he felt Blake's hands slam into his chest. The force knocked him backward, his feet leaving the concrete as he tumbled into the deep end of the pool. The shock of cold water hit him just as he heard their laughter above the surface. Ezra kicked hard, pushing toward the light, but as his head broke through, a heavy hand forced him back down. Water rushed into his nose and mouth. He tried to twist away, but more hands grabbed at him, pushing and holding him under. Through the churning water, he could see their distorted faces above him, laughing and jeering. Miles's meaty fingers dug into his shoulder while Blake's hand pressed down on the top of his head. Kevin's kicks stirred up the water, making it harder to see, harder to orient himself. "How's the water, boy?" Blake's muffled voice came through the surface. "Nice and refreshing, right?" Ezra's lungs began to burn. He forced himself to stay calm, to remember his training. His grandfather's voice cut through the panic. "Water is like any other battlefield. Use your opponent's force against them." He could hear splashing above. He knew the bullies were trying to make it look like roughhousing to anyone watching, but their grips were too tight, too deliberate. This wasn't play. They were trying to hurt him, maybe even kill him. Miles yanked him up for a moment, just long enough for Ezra to gasp a quick breath before Blake shoved him under again. The chlorine stung his eyes, but he kept them open, watching their movements through the rippling water. "Not so tough now, are you?" Kevin's distorted voice taunted as Ezra thrashed, playing up his struggle while actually positioning himself. "Maybe you should have stayed in your own neighborhood." His grandfather had taught him that water could amplify certain moves while nullifying others. The key was to use the buoyancy, to strike from angles they wouldn't expect. As his chest tightened from lack of air, Ezra knew it was time to act. He went limp for a moment, making them think he was weakening. Miles's grip loosened slightly. That was all he needed. In one explosive movement, Ezra planted his feet against the pool wall and pushed off hard, driving upward. His right leg shot out of the water like a torpedo, catching Miles square in the chest with a perfectly executed front kick. The big bully stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock, gasping as the air rushed from his lungs. Before the others could react, Ezra twisted underwater, his arms moving in practiced patterns. He grabbed Kevin's ankle and pulled, using the water's resistance to amplify the force. Kevin went down with a splash, flailing as he unexpectedly found himself submerged. Blake tried to back away, but Ezra was already moving. 8 years of training took over as he executed a flawless underwater sweep, his leg catching Blake behind the knees. The bully crashed into the pool, his confident sneer replaced by panic as he bobbed up, coughing and sputtering. Ezra burst through the surface, water streaming off him as he took a deep breath. His attackers were scattered now, Miles doubled over by the pool's edge, Kevin thrashing in the water, and Blake trying desperately to keep his head above water. All pretense of control gone. The quiet discipline his grandfather had instilled in him took hold, preventing him from pressing his advantage. He didn't need to hurt them, just show them he wasn't the easy target they'd expected. Through the chaos, he could hear Mr. Caleb's whistle blowing sharply across the pool deck. Blake came up gasping, his slick-back hair now plastered across his face. "What the hell?" he spluttered, real fear mixing with rage in his voice. "How did you—" But Ezra had already moved out of reach, using smooth, powerful strokes to put distance between himself and his attackers. The water that had been their weapon moments ago now carried him effortlessly, his trained muscles responding with precision his grandfather would have praised. Kevin finally found his footing in the shallow end, coughing up water. "He's crazy," he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Ezra. "Did you see what he did? He tried to drown us!" Miles had recovered enough to help Blake out of the pool, but his usual threatening stance was gone, replaced by wary confusion. None of them had expected resistance, let alone such skilled counterattacks. They had thought they were hunting easy prey, only to find themselves facing a trained fighter. The water around them gradually settled, though the tension in the air remained electric. Ezra stayed ready, his body balanced and centered in the deeper water, prepared for any further attacks. But the bullies seemed more interested in regrouping, shooting him venomous looks as they tried to recover their dignity. "You're dead," Blake spat out between coughs, but his voice trembled slightly. "You hear me? You're going to regret this." Ezra remained silent, letting his actions speak for themselves. His grandfather had always said that true strength didn't need threats or boasts. The way the bullies were backing away, helping each other up, told him they'd learned at least part of today's lesson. He was not someone they could terrorize without consequences. The commotion had drawn attention. Kids who'd been splashing in the shallow end now stood frozen, water dripping from their swimsuits as they stared. Parents lifted their sunglasses, craning their necks to see what was happening. A group of teenagers who'd been playing volleyball stopped mid-game, the ball floating forgotten between them. "He just went crazy and attacked them," shouted Dylan, one of Blake's friends who'd been lounging nearby. He jumped up from his chair, pointing accusingly at Ezra. They were just trying to welcome him to the neighborhood. More of the bullies' friends joined in, their voices overlapping as they spun their lies. Yeah, they were being nice, trying to include him. "He's the one who started it. We all saw it." Ezra treaded water, keeping his distance as he watched the crowd grow. His heart pounded, but he forced his breathing to stay steady, just like his grandfather had taught him. The water around him had calmed, but the air crackled with tension. 2 junior lifeguards hurried over, their red shorts bright against the pale concrete. They looked uncertain, glancing between Ezra and the 3 boys who were still catching their breath by the pool's edge. "What's going on here?" demanded the taller lifeguard. A freckled teenager not much older than Ezra. Blake found his voice first, still coughing slightly. We were just being friendly, showing the new kid around, and he went psycho on us. His wet hair hung in his face, making him look less threatening than usual. But his eyes burned with hatred as he glared at Ezra. Miles nodded vigorously, one hand still rubbing his chest where Ezra's kick had landed. He's lying if he says anything different. We've got witnesses. He gestured to the growing circle of onlookers, many of whom were nodding in agreement. Ezra opened his mouth to defend himself, but Kevin cut him off. Everyone saw it, Kevin shouted, his voice carrying across the pool deck. He tried to drown Blake. He's dangerous. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, more hostile. Parents pulled their children closer, shooting suspicious looks in Ezra's direction. He could feel the story taking shape around him, the narrative they wanted to believe about the violent black teenager attacking innocent white boys. A sharp whistle cut through the chaos. The crowd parted as Mr. Caleb, the head lifeguard, strode toward them. His weathered face was stern beneath his white hair, and despite his age, he moved with purpose and authority. "Clear the area," Mr. Caleb commanded, his deep voice brooking no argument. "Anyone not involved, back to your activities." When people hesitated, he added firmly, "Now." The junior lifeguard stepped back, deferring to his authority. Most of the onlookers dispersed, though some lingered at the edges, whispering and pointing. "Mr." Caleb surveyed the scene, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. The way Blake and his friends clustered together, the defensive position Ezra maintained in the water, the angry red mark forming on Miles's chest. "Young man," Mr. Caleb called to Ezra, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp and alert. "Come on out of the pool." Ezra hesitated for a moment, then swam to the ladder farthest from the bullies. He pulled himself out smoothly, water streaming from his dark blue swim trunks. He stood straight, refusing to hunch or look guilty. "He attacked us," Blake insisted again, but Mr. Caleb held up a hand, silencing him. "I saw more than you think," the older man said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the group. The bullies shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Dylan tried to jump in again. "We all saw what happened. He's the one who did I ask you to speak?" Mr. Caleb cut him off, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel. Dylan's mouth snapped shut. The elderly lifeguard turned to Ezra, speaking low enough that only he could hear. "Stay calm, son. I know what really went down here." His eyes held understanding, and something else. Recognition, perhaps. To the group at large, Mr. Caleb announced, "This incident will be reported and reviewed. For now, everyone needs to clear the area." He looked pointedly at Blake and his friends. "All of you, out of the pool area now." The bullies hesitated, but something in Mr. Caleb's stance made them think better of arguing. They gathered their things, shooting venomous looks at Ezra as they headed toward the exit. "You, mister," Caleb said quietly to Ezra, "come with me." He placed a gentle but firm hand on Ezra's shoulder, steering him away from the curious stares and whispered accusations. As they walked, Ezra could hear the ripple of conversations following them. "I always knew that boy would be trouble. Did you see what he did to poor Blake? They let anyone into this pool these days." Mr. Caleb's hand tightened slightly on his shoulder, steadying him. "Don't listen to them," he murmured. "Keep walking, head high." They moved past the snack bar, past the family changing rooms, toward the staff area. Each step took them further from the hostile atmosphere at the pool, but Ezra could feel the weight of what had happened settling over him like a heavy blanket. "Those moves back there," Mr. Caleb said softly as they walked. "I recognize that style. Your grandfather taught you well." Ezra's head snapped up in surprise, but Mr. Caleb was already opening the staff door, ushering him inside and away from the growing storm behind them. Mr. Caleb led Ezra to a weathered wooden bench tucked away behind the pool's maintenance building. The spot was hidden from the main area, shaded by old oak trees that blocked out both the sun and prying eyes. The The chlorine smell faded here, replaced by the earthy scent of grass and bark. "Sit down, son," Mr. Caleb said, lowering himself onto the bench. His movements were deliberate, measured like everything else about him. Ezra sat, his swim trunks still dripping. The rough wood pressed against his bare back, but he kept his posture straight, just as his grandfather had always insisted. "How did you know about my grandfather, mister?" Caleb smiled, though his eyes remained serious. "I recognize those moves in the water. That combination of precision and control. That's pure Jonah Walker style. Your grandfather and I trained together back in 1975 before he moved up north." "You knew him?" Ezra's voice softened with surprise. "Sure I did. He was one of the best martial artists I ever met. More importantly, he was a man of principle." Mr. Caleb paused, studying Ezra's face. "But that's not what we need to talk about right now. We need to discuss what's coming." A cool breeze rustled the leaves above them, making Ezra shiver slightly in his wet swimsuit. "What do you mean?" "Those boys who attacked you, Blake Turner, Kevin Price, and Miles Cooper, their families practically own this town. Blake's father is the police chief. Kevin's mother sits on the city council. Miles's parents are both lawyers." Mr. Caleb's voice was heavy with experience. "And they all play golf with Judge Harrison every Sunday." Ezra's stomach tightened. He'd known the boys were trouble, but this was worse than he'd imagined. "They're going to try to twist this," Mr. Caleb continued. "They'll paint you as the aggressor. They've got plenty of friends willing to lie for them, and plenty of adults ready to believe those lies without question." He shook his head slowly. "This town has a way of seeing what it wants to see, especially when it comes to race." "But I was defending myself," Ezra protested. "They tried to drown me." "I know that. I saw enough to know exactly what happened. But truth isn't always enough in Orchard." Mr. Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "This town has a history of burying incidents like this. 20 years ago, a black family's house was vandalized. Police called it teenage pranks. 10 years ago, a black student was beaten behind the high school. They said it was just a fight that got out of hand. 2 years ago, a black business owner found threats painted on his store. They dismissed it as random graffiti. Ezra's phone buzzed in his backpack, which sat at his feet. Then it buzzed again and again. "The rumors are already spreading," Mr. Caleb said grimly. "Social media moves faster than truth these days." With slightly trembling hands, Ezra pulled out his phone. The screen was lit up with notifications, text messages, Instagram alerts, Snapchat updates. His heart sank as he began to read. "Psycho attacked Blake at the pool. New kid went crazy. Tried to kill Kevin and Miles. Watch out for the violent new kid." The messages kept coming, each one worse than the last. Someone had already posted a video, carefully edited to start after the bullies had pushed him in, showing only his defensive moves out of context. The comments were filling up with hate and accusations. They should arrest him. Knew he was trouble. Keep him away from our pool. Photos appeared of Blake, Kevin, and Miles looking injured and upset, though Ezra knew they'd barely been hurt. Their friends were sharing the pictures everywhere, adding their own fake witness accounts. "I was there." He just snapped and attacked them. They were being so nice to him, too. "This is what we get for letting them in our neighborhood." Ezra's hands shook harder as he scrolled through the growing pile of lies. Each buzz of his phone felt like another nail in a coffin being built around him. The truth was being buried under an avalanche of false stories and racist assumptions, and he could feel the weight of it crushing down on him. "They're framing me," he whispered, his voice tight with disbelief and growing fear. "They're making everyone think I'm some kind of monster." Mr. Caleb placed a steady hand on Ezra's shoulder. "That's their game. They've played it before. But listen to me. You're not alone in this fight." Another wave of notifications flooded Ezra's phone. More accusations, more threats, more lies, spreading like poison through the community. His heart sank further as he realized how quickly his life was being turned upside down. All because he dared to defend himself against 3 racist bullies who had tried to drown him. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a direct message from Blake. "You're dead meat now, boy. Nobody's going to believe you over us. Welcome to Orchard." The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of the small rental house as Ezra sat at the kitchen table with his mother. His shoulders shook with quiet sobs while Danielle held him close, her work uniform still on from her shift at the diner. "I didn't start it, Mom," Ezra choked out between breaths. "They tried to drown me. I just defended myself like Grandpa taught me." Danielle stroked his back gently, her own eyes glistening. "I believe you, baby. I know you wouldn't hurt anyone unless you had to." Her voice was soft but steady, an anchor in the storm of his emotions. The kitchen was warm and cramped, dishes from breakfast still in the sink because Danielle hadn't had time between jobs to wash them. The ancient refrigerator hummed loudly, its familiar drone usually comforting, but now just adding to Ezra's headache. "The whole town thinks I'm some kind of violent thug," he said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You should see what they're saying online. They're making up stories, saying I just attacked those guys for no reason." Danielle's arms tightened around him. "People in this town have always been quick to believe the worst about folks like us. But we know the truth. You're your grandfather's grandson, disciplined, honorable, strong." Ezra pulled back slightly to look at his mother's face. Even exhausted from working 3 jobs, her eyes held that fierce, protective love that had gotten them through so many hard times. "What are we going to do, Mom? Mr. Caleb says their parents are really powerful here. We'll figure it out together, baby. We always do." Danielle reached across the table for her phone. "Let me call my friend Sharon. She works as a legal secretary." "Maybe she can." Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the kitchen, flashing through the windows and painting the walls in alternating colors. The sharp wail of a police siren cut through the evening quiet, then fell silent, leaving just the lights spinning. Ezra's heart started hammering. "Mom, stay calm," Danielle said, though her own voice shook slightly. She stood up, straightening her waitress uniform. "Remember what your grandfather always said. Stay focused. Stay controlled." Heavy footsteps approached their front door, followed by loud knocking that seemed to shake the whole house. "Police, open up!" Danielle squeezed Ezra's shoulder once, then walked to the door. She opened it to find 3 officers standing on their small porch, their hands resting meaningfully on their weapons. "Mrs. Jones." The lead officer's voice was cold. "I'm Officer Peterson. We're here about a serious assault complaint filed against your son." "Assault?" Danielle's voice rose with disbelief. "My son was the victim here. Those boys tried to drown him at the pool today. That's not what multiple witnesses are saying, ma'am." Officer Peterson's eyes shifted to Ezra, who had moved to stand behind his mother. "We have statements from several people saying your son violently attacked 3 minors without provocation." "That's a lie," Ezra burst out, his frustration overwhelming his usual quiet nature. "They pushed me in and held my head under water. I couldn't breathe. I only defended myself." "Watch your tone, son," another officer warned, taking a step forward. "We've got video showing you assaulting those boys." "That video is edited," Ezra protested. "It doesn't show what they did first." "They could have killed my baby," Danielle added, her voice trembling with anger. "And now you're here threatening him instead of investigating the real criminals?" Officer Peterson's face hardened. "Mrs. Jones, I suggest you and your son cooperate. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." "Are you threatening us?" Danielle demanded, drawing herself up despite being much shorter than the officers. "My son has the right to defend himself against racist attacks." "Watch the accusations, ma'am," Peterson snapped. "One more word about racism and we can discuss obstruction charges." Ezra felt his mother's hand grip his arm, warning him to stay quiet. His grandfather's voice echoed in his head. "Control your emotions or they'll control you." "Here's your court summons," Peterson said, thrusting a paper at Danielle. "Juvenile court next Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. Your son better be there or we'll come back with an arrest warrant." Danielle's hands shook as she took the paper, but her voice remained steady. "We'll be there. And we'll be filing our own complaint about those boys trying to drown my son." Peterson's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Good luck with that. Chief Turner will be very interested in your version of events." He turned to leave, then looked back with cold eyes. "Word of advice: keep your son under control. Wouldn't want any more incidents." The officers walked back to their cruiser, leaving Danielle and Ezra standing in the doorway. The emergency lights continued to flash for a moment longer, then went dark, plunging their small front yard into shadow. Danielle closed the door slowly, then leaned against it. Her strong facade crumbled as tears began rolling down her cheeks. "Oh, baby!" Ezra hugged his mother tightly, feeling her whole body trembling. The court summons fell from her hand to the floor, the official letterhead stark against their worn carpet. Terror gripped his heart as the reality of their situation sank in. They were alone against the whole system, and the system had already decided he was guilty. "What are they going to do to me?" he whispered into his mother's shoulder. Danielle pulled back, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. "They're trying to scare us, baby. But we're not going to let them win. We're going to fight this." But Ezra could see the fear behind her brave words. They both knew what happened to black teens who got caught up in the justice system. One court appearance could destroy his whole future, and that's exactly what the bullies and their powerful parents wanted. Ezra woke to the sound of his mother's sharp intake of breath. Sunlight was just beginning to filter through his bedroom window. But something felt wrong. The morning silence held an edge that made his skin prickle. "Ezra," his mother's voice carried from the front of the house. "Baby, come here quick." He threw off his covers and rushed out, heart pounding. The living room was filled with an unusual brightness, and as he entered, he saw why. Shards of glass littered the carpet around the big front window, now just an empty frame with jagged edges. The morning breeze pushed through the hole, making the curtains dance. "Mom!" Ezra called out carefully, stepping around the glass. "Are you okay?" "I'm out here," she answered from outside. Her voice sounded tight, controlled in that way that meant she was holding back tears. Ezra found her standing in the driveway, staring at their garage door, his breath caught in his throat. Bright red letters screamed, "Go home!" across the white surface, the paint still looking wet and fresh. Several rocks lay scattered nearby, the same ones that had been used on their window. "I already called the police," Danielle said quietly. Her arms wrapped around herself despite the morning warmth. "Not that they'll do anything." Ezra touched the paint with trembling fingers. It came away red on his skin, like blood. "This is because of yesterday. Because I fought back." "This is because they're cowards," Danielle corrected firmly. "They come in the night like thieves because they're afraid to face us in the light." A car slowed as it passed their house. The driver craned his neck to stare at the graffiti, then sped up when he saw them looking back. Word would spread fast in their small town. By noon, everyone would know. "We should start cleaning this up," Ezra said, trying to sound practical even as rage and fear churned in his stomach. "Before more people see," Danielle's voice was still. "Let them see. Let everyone see what kind of town this really is." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "We're documenting everything." Ezra looked at the broken window, the scattered rocks, the hateful message. His grandfather's training had taught him to analyze threats, to stay calm, and think clearly. These weren't just pranks. They were warnings. The bullies and their families were sending a message. Back down or worse will come. The sound of another car approaching made them both tense, but this one pulled into their driveway. Mr. Caleb stepped out, his lined face grave as he took in the damage. "I heard through the grapevine," he said, walking up to them. "Some folks saw cars here late last night, but couldn't identify who it was." His voice carried years of bitter understanding. "Mr. Caleb." Danielle greeted him, shoulders sagging slightly with relief at seeing a friendly face. "You didn't have to come." "Yes, I did." He looked at the garage door, then at the broken window. "This is how they operate. First, they try to drown a boy. Then, they try to drown the truth. Then, they try to drown the spirit." Ezra felt the weight of Mr. Caleb's words. The old man spoke from experience, his eyes carrying memories of similar battles fought long ago. "The police are supposed to be coming," Danielle said, checking her phone. "Though I don't expect much." Mr. Caleb agreed. "They'll write a report and file it away, just like they did with the pool incident. The system works exactly how it was designed to work." He turned to Ezra, studying the young man's face. "How are you holding up, son?" Ezra started to say fine automatically, but stopped. His grandfather had always taught him to be honest with himself. "I'm scared and angry, and I don't know what to do with all of it." Mr. Caleb nodded approvingly at his honesty. "Fear and anger are like fire, Ezra. They can burn you up inside, or they can forge you into something stronger. It all depends on how you channel them." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring. "I have a private gym behind my house. Your grandfather used to train there with me back in the day. It's not fancy, but it's got everything you need to keep your skills sharp." "You want to train me?" Ezra asked, surprise momentarily pushing aside his darker emotions. "I want to give you a safe place to work through what you're feeling," Mr. Caleb corrected. "Somewhere you can focus on getting stronger instead of just being afraid. Your grandfather would want that." Danielle touched Ezra's arm. "That might be good for you, baby. You always said training helped clear your mind." Mr. Caleb held out the keys. "The gym is yours whenever you need it. Early morning, late night, doesn't matter. Better than sitting here waiting for the next rock to come through your window." Ezra took the keys, feeling their weight in his palm. His grandfather had always said that martial arts wasn't just about fighting. It was about finding your center when the world tries to knock you off balance. "Thank you, Mr. Caleb," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," the old man replied with a slight smile. "Wait until you see what kind of training I have in mind. Your grandfather and I learned some pretty effective techniques in Vietnam that most dojos don't teach anymore." A police car finally turned onto their street, moving with deliberate slowness. Mr. Caleb's expression hardened as he watched it approach. "They'll try to minimize this," he warned. "Make it sound like kids playing pranks. Don't let them dismiss what's really happening here." The patrol car pulled up, and Ezra recognized Officer Peterson from the night before. The man's face showed no surprise at the vandalism, as if he'd expected to find exactly this scene. That afternoon, the summer heat pressed down like a heavy blanket as Ezra walked his bike up Mr. Caleb's gravel driveway. The old Victorian house sat back from the road, partially hidden by towering oak trees. Behind it, barely visible from the street, stood a weathered building that looked like it might have once been a carriage house. Mr. Caleb was already waiting outside, wearing loose-fitting black pants and a faded army t-shirt. He gestured for Ezra to follow him around back. "Your grandfather helped me convert this place back in 1975, he said, unlocking a heavy wooden door. "Every warrior needs a sanctuary." The interior was cooler and dimmer than Ezra expected. Sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating a space that felt frozen in time. Old-school training equipment lined the walls: heavy bags, speed bags, wooden dummies covered in notches and scars. The floor was solid wood, worn smooth by decades of bare feet. "This is amazing," Ezra breathed, taking it all in. The air smelled of leather and wood polish, with hints of incense. "Your grandfather thought so too." Mr. Caleb moved to a small shrine in the corner where photographs and medals were carefully arranged. He pointed to a faded picture of two young men in army fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders. "That's us in 1969, just before a particularly nasty firefight. Your grandfather saved my life that day." Ezra stepped closer, studying his grandfather's young face. The same quiet strength he remembered was there even then. "Time to warm up," Mr. Caleb announced. "Let's see what you remember of the basics." They started with fundamental movements: blocks, strikes, stances. Mr. Caleb watched closely, occasionally making small corrections to Ezra's form. "Good power," he noted as Ezra delivered a series of punches to a heavy bag. "But you're telegraphing your moves. In a real fight, that split second of warning could cost you." They worked on tightening Ezra's technique, making his movements more efficient. Mr. Caleb shared stories between exercises, painting a picture of the grandfather Ezra had known only in his later years. He was always the calm one, Mr. Caleb recalled as they practiced defensive footwork. Even in combat, never lost his cool. Said panic was a luxury we couldn't afford. Sweat soaked through Ezra's shirt as they moved through increasingly complex drills. Mr. Caleb might have been nearly 70, but his movements were still precise and powerful. "The boys at the pool," Mr. Caleb said during a water break. "They attacked you because they thought you were weak, but they don't understand what true strength is." "What do you mean?" Ezra asked, wiping his face with a towel. "They mistake cruelty for power. They think hurting others makes them strong." Mr. Caleb shook his head. "Your grandfather knew better. He taught that real strength comes from protecting yourself and others with control and dignity." They moved on to grappling techniques, ways to break holds and escape from bigger opponents. Mr. Caleb demonstrated moves slowly, explaining the principles behind each one. "These were your grandfather's specialties," he said as Ezra practiced breaking out of a chokehold. He believed that size doesn't matter if you understand leverage and timing. The afternoon light began to fade as they continued training. Mr. Caleb shared more stories about Vietnam, about the civil rights era, about teaching martial arts to black kids in a time when many dojos wouldn't accept them. "Your grandfather never backed down," he said, watching Ezra work combinations on the heavy bag. "But he never started fights either. He knew the difference between standing up for yourself and looking for trouble." Finally, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Mr. Caleb called an end to the session. Ezra's muscles ached, but he felt more centered than he had since the pool incident. "Same time tomorrow?" Mr. Caleb asked, helping Ezra wrap an ice pack around his knuckles. "Yes, sir." Ezra nodded. "Thank you for this, for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Mr. Caleb smiled. "Tomorrow we start the hard stuff." Ezra walked out into the cooling evening air, his body tired but his mind clear. He felt stronger already, not just physically, but mentally. His grandfather's presence seemed closer here, as if the old dojo held echoes of his wisdom. The peaceful feeling lasted until he reached his bike, chained to Mr. Caleb's fence. A piece of paper had been stuck through the spokes, folded once. Ezra's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The message was typed. "No signature. Get out of town now, or what happened to your house will seem like a welcome party." The school hallway felt longer than usual as Ezra walked to his first class. Every step echoed against the metal lockers, mixing with hushed whispers and sudden silences that followed him like shadows. Groups of students split apart as he passed, their eyes darting away when he looked in their direction. His shoulders tensed as he heard someone whisper, "That's him. The guy who attacked those boys at the pool." Another voice added, "I heard he knows kung fu or something. Total psycho." Ezra kept his head high, just like Mr. Caleb had advised. Your grandfather walked through worse, the old mentor had told him that morning. Keep your dignity. Don't let them see fear. At his locker, Ezra's fingers trembled slightly as he worked the combination lock. A group of girls nearby grabbed their books and hurried away, shooting nervous glances over their shoulders. The hallway was emptying as first period approached, the crowd thinning to stragglers. That's when he heard them. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets, coming closer. "Well, look who it is." Blake's voice dripped with venom. the Karate Kid himself. Ezra turned slowly, his back against the lockers. Blake, Kevin, and Miles had formed a half-circle around him. Blake's eye was still swollen from the pool incident, and Miles walked with a slight limp. Their faces were twisted with hatred and wounded pride. "I'm not looking for trouble," Ezra said quietly, his grandfather's teachings echoing in his mind. "Avoid conflict when possible. Use words before fists." Kevin slammed his palm against the locker beside Ezra's head. The sound rang through the nearly empty hallway. "Trouble found you anyway, tough guy. You made us look bad," Miles growled, stepping closer. "Nobody makes us look bad." Ezra's muscles coiled, ready to defend himself, but he remembered Mr. Caleb's warning. "At school, they'll be watching you extra close. One wrong move, and they'll say you're the aggressor." Blake moved in, his breath hot on Ezra's face. "Your little ninja tricks won't help you here. We've got friends everywhere. Teachers, coaches, the principal's golf buddy. That's Kevin's dad. My father's on the school board," Miles added with a smirk. "One word from him and you're out on your ass." Ezra's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He could take them, even all three at once. His body hummed with the techniques Mr. Caleb had drilled into him yesterday. But that's exactly what they wanted. "Back off," Ezra said firmly, looking Blake directly in the eyes. "You don't want this." Blake grabbed Ezra's shirt collar, shoving him hard against the lockers. "Oh, I really do. You think you're so tough? Let's see those moves now with witnesses around." A few students had stopped to watch, phones raised. Exactly as planned, Ezra realized. They wanted him to fight back, to prove their lies about him being violent. "What's going on here?" A sharp voice cut through the tension. Mrs. Harper, the English teacher, strode toward them, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Blake immediately released Ezra's shirt and stepped back, his face transforming into a mask of innocence. "Nothing, Mrs. Harper. Just talking." "He was threatening us again," Kevin added quickly. "Like at the pool." Ezra straightened his shirt, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. "That's not true. They cornered me." "Enough." Mrs. Harper cut him off. She looked at the three white boys, then at Ezra, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I've heard about the pool incident, Mr. Jones, and I've heard about your martial arts background." The way she said it made it sound dirty, dangerous, like having self-defense training made him some kind of thug. "Mrs. Harper, they're lying. They tried to." I said enough. She crossed her arms, looking down at him through her reading glasses. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Jones. This is a peaceful school. We don't tolerate violence or threats of any kind. If you want to remain enrolled here, I suggest you watch your behavior very carefully." The three bullies smirked behind her back. Blake made a small, throat-cutting gesture when Mrs. Harper wasn't looking. "Do you understand me?" she pressed. Ezra's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to defend himself, to tell the truth. But he saw the futility in her eyes. She'd already decided who he was. "Yes, ma'am," he managed to say. "Good. Now get to class, all of you." She watched as Blake and his friends sauntered away, then turned back to Ezra with a stern look. "Remember what I said, Mr. Jones. One wrong move, and you'll regret it." The warning hung in the air as she walked away, leaving Ezra alone in the hallway. The bell rang, its shrill tone matching the ringing in his ears. He stood there for a moment, his reflection fractured in the scratched metal of the lockers, feeling the weight of injustice pressing down on his shoulders. The punching bag swayed violently as Ezra unleashed a series of rapid strikes. Sweat dripped down his face in Mr. Caleb's small backyard dojo, the evening air thick with humidity. Each punch carried the weight of the day's frustrations, the whispers, the threats, Mrs. Harper's dismissal. "Harder," Mr. Caleb called from where he stood watching. "But control your breathing. Anger makes you sloppy." Ezra's next punch went wild, missing the center of the bag. He stepped back, chest heaving, and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "They set me up today. Made it look like I was the one causing trouble. I figured they would. Mr. Caleb moved closer, his weathered hands adjusting Ezra's stance. Your grandfather faced the same tricks. People in power, they got a playbook for keeping others down. How did he handle it? Ezra threw another combination, this time with better form. Same way you will, with discipline. Mister, Caleb tapped Ezra's shoulder, signaling him to stop. Come here, let me show you something. They moved to the center of the training mat. The small dojo was simple but well-maintained, with worn wooden floors and walls lined with training weapons. A single photo hung near the door. Mr. Caleb and Ezra's grandfather in their younger days, both in martial arts uniforms. Your opponents think anger is strength, Mr. Caleb said, demonstrating a slow-flowing movement. But anger is like fire. Let it burn too hot, it blinds you, controls you. Ezra mirrored the movement, feeling his muscles stretch. How can I not be angry? They're trying to destroy my life. I didn't say don't be angry. Mr. Caleb corrected Ezra's arm position. I said don't let anger control you. Channel it. Make it serve you instead of burning you up. They moved through the technique several times. It was more complex than anything Ezra had learned before. A series of blocks that flowed into strikes, turning an attacker's energy against them. See how the movement redirects force? Mr. Caleb demonstrated again. That's what you do with anger. Don't let it explode. Guide it. Use it to fuel your focus, your discipline. Ezra practiced the sequence, his movements becoming smoother with each repetition. The physical activity helped clear his mind, pushing away the day's tensions. Your grandfather mastered this technique in Vietnam, Mr. Caleb said quietly. Saved his life more than once. But the real battle came when he got home, facing people who smiled to his face while trying to break his spirit. How did he win? Ezra asked. By refusing to break, by staying focused on what mattered. Mr. Caleb moved to face Ezra directly. Those boys at school, they want you to lose control, to prove their lies about you. Every time you stay calm, you prove them wrong. They practiced for another hour. Mr. Caleb teaching Ezra increasingly advanced combinations. Each movement required total concentration, leaving no room for anger or fear. Remember, Mr. Caleb said as they finished, physical technique is only half the battle. The mind must be stronger than the body. Ezra bowed to his teacher, feeling more centered than he had all day. Thank you, Mr. Caleb. Thank me by staying smart, by proving them wrong. Mr. Caleb smiled. Now go home. Your mother's probably waiting with dinner. The drive home was short, just a few blocks through their modest neighborhood. Ezra found his mother in the kitchen, stirring a pot of her famous jambalaya. The spicy aroma filled their small house, bringing back memories of happier times. Perfect timing, Danielle said, giving him a warm smile. Set the table. Ezra grabbed plates from the cabinet, noting how tired his mother looked. She'd worked a double shift at the hospital today, yet still made time to cook his favorite meal. They sat down together, a rare moment when both were home and awake at the same time. The food was delicious, warming more than just their stomachs. How was training? Danielle asked, serving herself a second helping. Good. Mr. Caleb taught me some new techniques. Ezra took a bite, savoring the flavors. He knew Grandpa really well. Your grandfather would be proud of how you're handling all this. She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. I know I am. Even with all the trouble I've caused, you haven't caused anything. You're standing up for yourself, just like he taught you. Her eyes were fierce with maternal pride. We're not running away. This is our home now. Ezra felt strength in her words, in the quiet determination that had carried their family through so many challenges. I won't let them win, Mom. We won't let them win, she corrected, her smile gentle but firm. We're in this together. They finished dinner talking about lighter things, his upcoming history test, her funny story about a patient at the hospital, plans for the weekend. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like they were just a regular family sharing a meal. A flash of light through the window caught Ezra's attention, Car headlights moved slowly past their house. The vehicle lingered longer than it should have, then accelerated away with a roar of engine. Danielle's hand tightened on her fork, but her voice remained steady. "Would you like seconds, baby?" "Yes, please," Ezra said, matching her calm tone while his heart raced. They continued eating, their peaceful moment altered but not broken, refusing to let fear rob them of the simple pleasure of sharing a meal together. Ezra sat at his desk, trying to focus on homework, when his phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. "Meet at the pool at 9. Want to talk things out. No more fighting." His jaw clenched as he read it twice more. Another message popped up. "Just talking. Promise. Time to end this before it gets worse." Ezra's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The smart move would be to ignore it, but something in him couldn't back down. Not again, not after everything. He glanced at the clock. 8:30 in the evening. His mom was working the night shift at the hospital. Mr. Caleb's warning echoed in his mind. "They'll try to get you alone. Don't fall for it." But running and hiding wasn't the answer either. His grandfather's voice, preserved in memory, seemed to whisper, "Sometimes you have to meet trouble head-on." Ezra changed into dark clothes, black jeans, navy hoodie. He slipped on his running shoes, the ones with the best grip. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection looked older somehow, his eyes harder than they used to be. The walk to Orchard Community Pool took 15 minutes. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks. A few cars passed, but the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. His phone buzzed again. "You coming?" "We're waiting to talk." Ezra didn't respond. He kept walking, senses alert for any movement in the darkness. The martial arts training had sharpened his awareness. He noticed everything now, the rustle of leaves, distant dog barks, the slight change in temperature as he neared the pool. The facility was closed for the night, its gates locked. The water gleamed black under the quarter moon, rippling slightly in the evening breeze. No lights were on inside the fence. No cars visible in the parking lot, but someone was here. He could feel it. Ezra approached cautiously, staying in the shadows. His footsteps were silent on the concrete, years of training teaching him how to move without sound when needed. A metallic clang came from behind the equipment shed, then whispers quickly hushed. "Hey!" Blake's voice called out. "Over here. Just want to talk." Ezra didn't answer. He circled wider, keeping his back to the fence. The shed was a blind spot. Anyone could be hiding there. "Come on, man," Blake said, stepping into view. He held his hands up, trying to look harmless. "This has gone too far. Let's work it out." In the dim light, Blake's face seemed calm, reasonable. But Ezra caught the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Why here?" Ezra asked, staying well back. "Why after dark?" "Neutral ground," Blake shrugged. "No teachers, no parents, just us sorting things out." Movement caught Ezra's eye, shadows shifting near the shed. Kevin's lanky form emerged, then Miles's broader silhouette. They spread out, trying to look casual while moving to cut off his escape routes. "You're lying," Ezra said flatly, his muscles tensed, ready to move. Like always, Blake's fake smile vanished. "Maybe. But you still came. Didn't you?" "Had to know for sure," Ezra replied. He tracked Kevin and Miles's positions without turning his head. "Had to see if you could sink any lower." Big words from someone about to get what's coming to him. Blake reached behind the shed, pulling out something long and metallic. A pipe. "You embarrassed us at the pool, made us look weak." Kevin produced a length of chain, letting it dangle. Miles already had his pipe gripped in both hands, eager to swing. "You did that yourselves," Ezra said. He shifted his stance slightly, centering his weight. "By being cowards who only fight 3-on-1. Blake's face twisted with rage. "Get him!" They rushed forward together, weapons raised. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the pool fence as they closed in, metal glinting in the moonlight. Ezra stood his ground, hands loose at his sides, waiting. His grandfather's voice seemed to whisper again, "Let them come to you. Their anger makes them predictable." The circle tightened, 3 shadows converging with deadly intent, thinking they had him trapped. They were wrong. The pipe whistled through the air, where Ezra's head had been a split second before. He moved like water, flowing past Blake's wild swing, while staying just out of Kevin's chain reach. Miles lunged with his own pipe, but Ezra was already gone, circling away from their trap. "Stand still!" Blake shouted, frustration making his attacks wider, sloppier. Ezra's training took over. Time seemed to slow as his grandfather's lessons clicked into place. Use their momentum against them. Let anger defeat itself. Kevin swung the chain in a wide arc. Ezra stepped inside the swing, caught the chain mid-motion, and yanked. Kevin stumbled forward off balance. In one fluid motion, Ezra wrapped the chain around Kevin's wrist and pulled down hard. Kevin crashed face first into the concrete with a yelp of pain, the chain clattering away. Miles charged from behind, pipe raised high. Ezra spun, dropping low. His legs swept out in a perfect circle, catching Miles's ankles. The bigger boy went airborne, pipe flying from his grip. He landed hard on his back, the impact forcing air from his lungs in a wheezing gasp. "You're dead." Blake swung his pipe like a baseball bat. Ezra caught it with both hands, the impact stinging his palms but stopping the momentum cold. Blake's eyes widened in shock. "No," Ezra said calmly. "I'm trained." He twisted the pipe sharply, wrenching it from Blake's grasp. In the same motion, he struck Blake's knee with a precise sidekick. Blake howled, staggering backward. Kevin was up again, nose bleeding, throwing wild punches. Ezra blocked each one methodically, letting Kevin tire himself out. When Kevin overextended on a right hook, Ezra grabbed his arm and used the boy's own momentum to flip him over his hip. Kevin landed in a heap next to Miles, who was still struggling to breathe. "Stay down," Ezra warned them. "It's over." But Blake wasn't finished. He charged like a wounded bull, hatred twisting his features. Ezra sidestepped, redirecting Blake's rush toward the pool. A quick push was all it took. Blake's own speed sent him flying into the water with a massive splash. Kevin and Miles tried to scramble away, but Ezra was faster. He grabbed them both by their shirt collars, one in each hand. With strength built from countless hours of training, he dragged them to the pool's edge. "Remember trying to drown me?" he asked quietly. "Remember laughing while I fought for air?" "Please," Miles whimpered. "Don't." Ezra launched them both into the deep end. They surfaced spluttering, thrashing in panic. Blake was already clinging to the edge, coughing up water. "How does it feel?" Ezra called out. "Being helpless? Being afraid?" The 3 bullies huddled against the pool wall, shivering. Their weapons lay scattered on the concrete, useless now. In the moonlight, they looked small and pathetic. "I could leave you here all night," Ezra continued, his voice steady. "Could hold you under like you did to me. But I'm not like you." He picked up their dropped weapons one by one, tossing them far away into the bushes. "Get out. Go home. And if you ever come near me again—" "We won't," Blake sputtered, teeth chattering. "We swear. Just let us go," Kevin pleaded. Ezra watched as they climbed out, water streaming from their clothes. They stumbled away without looking back, supporting each other as they limped into the darkness. A soft rustle came from behind the fence. Ezra spun toward the sound, ready for more attackers. But instead he caught glimpses of several phones being quickly lowered. Whispers drifted through the night air. "Did you get it all?" "Every second." "Holy that was amazing. They'll never live this down." Ezra peered into the shadows, but couldn't make out faces. The witnesses, whoever they were, melted away into the night, taking their recorded evidence with them. He stood alone by the pool, breathing steadily, letting the adrenaline fade. The water lapped quietly against the edges, peaceful now. His grandfather would have been proud. He'd won the fight without causing serious injury, controlled but decisive. The night breeze carried away the last echoes of the confrontation, leaving only the gentle sounds of crickets and distant traffic. Ezra gathered himself, straightened his clothes, and headed home. He'd faced their worst and emerged stronger. Whatever came next, he was ready. Ezra pushed his eggs around his plate, too tired to eat. His muscles ached from last night's fight, though he'd managed to hide his limp from his mother. Across the small kitchen table, Danielle sipped her coffee in silence. Dark circles under her eyes showed she'd barely slept. The morning sun streamed through their cracked window, the one they'd covered with cardboard after the rocks came through. The go-home graffiti was still visible on their garage door through the kitchen window, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. A rapid knock at the front door made them both jump. Danielle's coffee sloshed over the rim of her mug. "It's Caleb!" Mr. Caleb's familiar voice called out. "You need to see this." Ezra hurried to let him in. The old instructor burst through the door, tablet in hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "Turn on the news," he ordered, already pulling up something on his tablet. "It's everywhere." Danielle clicked on their small television. The local morning news was just starting, but Mr. Caleb waved it away. No, look at this first." He set the tablet on the kitchen table. A video was already playing, the nighttime footage grainy but clear enough. Ezra recognized himself standing by the pool as three figures approached with weapons. "Someone recorded everything?" Danielle gasped. "Several someones." Mr. Caleb grinned. "From multiple angles. Watch." They huddled around the small screen. The video showed the entire confrontation in stark detail: the ambush attempt, Ezra's controlled defense, the bullies' humiliating defeat. The audio picked up every threat, every plea for mercy. "This went viral overnight," Mr. Caleb explained, "first on TikTok, then Twitter. By midnight, it was on national news sites. Look at the view count." Ezra's eyes widened at the numbers. 2 million views and climbing every minute. Mr. Caleb scrolled through comments. "People are outraged. The timestamps prove you were attacked after hours. The weapons are clearly visible. And the best part?" He pulled up another video, this one from the original pool incident. "Someone had footage of them trying to drown you, too. They've spliced the videos together, showing the whole pattern of harassment." Danielle's hands trembled as she watched her son being forced underwater, then the footage of last night's vindication. "This changes everything," she whispered. The television suddenly blared with breaking news. A reporter stood outside their local police station. Allegations of corruption and racial bias in the handling of the Ezra Jones case. Multiple videos surfacing overnight appear to show the teenager was actually the victim of repeated attacks. Mr. Caleb changed tabs on his tablet. "The police chief is already doing damage control. The bullies' parents are scrambling to hire lawyers, but the evidence is overwhelming." Ezra's phone buzzed continuously as notifications poured in, support messages from strangers, interview requests from journalists, links to social media posts condemning the attackers. "Look at this." Mr. Caleb pointed to a particular comment thread. "People are sharing similar stories from this town going back decades. The dam has broken. Everyone who stayed quiet before is speaking up now." Danielle covered her mouth, tears welling up. They can't sweep this under the rug anymore. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, they saw a news van parking across the street. A reporter and cameraman were already heading toward their house. "There will be more coming," Mr. Caleb warned. "This story has everything. Racism, corruption, martial arts, justice served. The media is going to be all over it." Ezra's phone rang. It was their lawyer, calling far earlier than usual. Danielle answered and put it on speaker. "The DA's office is dropping all charges," the lawyer announced without preamble. They're launching an investigation into the police department's handling of the case instead. Those videos are a game changer. More vehicles pulled up outside. 2 more news vans and several cars with out-of-state plates. Danielle peeked through the curtains, then turned to Ezra with tears streaming down her face. "Baby, come here!" She choked out the words, pulling him into a tight hug. Ezra held his mother as she sobbed against his shoulder, her whole body shaking with relief. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. "They can't hurt us anymore." Mr. Caleb smiled at them both, his own eyes glistening. "Your grandfather would be so proud, son. You stood your ground with honor. You defended yourself with skill and restraint, and now the whole world knows the truth." Through the window, cameras flashed as reporters gathered on their lawn. Phones continued buzzing with messages of support. The television anchor was now reading statements from civil rights organizations promising to investigate the town's history of racial incidents. Danielle pulled back just enough to cup Ezra's face in her hands. "My brave, beautiful boy," she said softly. "We made it through." The courthouse steps were packed with reporters and camera crews, their equipment glinting in the afternoon sun. Microphones jabbed forward like spears as Ezra climbed the stairs with his mother and Mr. Caleb flanking him protectively. "Ezra, how long were you being targeted? Did the police ignore your complaints? Can you demonstrate the martial arts moves you used?" Ezra kept his head high, but said nothing, just as Mr. Caleb had advised. Their lawyer met them at the entrance, her briefcase clutched tight. "It's a circus in there," she warned in a low voice. "The prosecutors are still planning to throw everything at you. The police chief is personally attending, and all 3 families are present with their legal teams." Inside the juvenile courtroom, Ezra's stomach clenched at the sight of Blake, Kevin, and Miles sitting with their parents in the front row. The boys wore pressed shirts and innocent expressions, but he noticed Kevin's arm in a sling and Blake's face still showing faint bruises from last night. Their parents glared daggers at Ezra. Mr. Peterson, Blake's father, and the town's biggest real estate developer whispered something to the prosecutor. The police chief nodded along, his brass badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Morgan entered, her face stern as she surveyed the packed courtroom. News of the viral video hadn't stopped the hearing from proceeding, though reporters weren't allowed inside. Their cameras pressed against the windows instead. "Be seated," the judge ordered. "We're here for case number JV 2,022,714 regarding the juvenile defendant Ezra Jones." The prosecutor stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, the state seeks to prove that the defendant engaged in a pattern of violent behavior, culminating in a premeditated assault on 3 minors last night. We have multiple witness statements." "Objection, Your Honor," Ezra's lawyer interrupted. "The prosecution is attempting to introduce new allegations without proper notice." "Overruled," Judge Morgan said. "But watch your step, Mr. Turner. Proceed." The prosecutor smiled thinly. "We'll demonstrate that the defendant's martial arts training makes him a danger to others, that he used these skills to deliberately harm 3 upstanding young men who were simply—" "Your Honor," a deep voice boomed from the back of the courtroom. Mr. Caleb stood up, something clutched in his hand. "If I may approach?" The judge frowned. "Sir, this is highly irregular. Who are you?" "Caleb Brooks, Your Honor. Former Marine, retired martial arts instructor, and witness to the ongoing harassment of this young man." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor's face reddened. "Your Honor, this is completely improper. I have evidence that proves these boys attempted to drown Ezra Jones, then later attacked him with weapons," Mr. Caleb continued, holding up a USB drive. "Video evidence from multiple sources." The bully's parents shifted uncomfortably. The police chief suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Judge Morgan studied Mr. Caleb for a long moment. "Approach the bench, Mr. Brooks." Mr. Caleb walked forward with dignity, his combat boots clicking on the floor. He handed the USB drive to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Your Honor, the prosecutor sputtered. Any evidence must be properly submitted through— I'm aware of procedure, Mr. Turner. Judge Morgan cut him off. But given the serious nature of these counter-allegations, I believe viewing this immediately serves the interest of justice. A screen lowered from the ceiling. The projector hummed to life. The first video began playing the pool incident. Gasps filled the courtroom as Blake, Kevin, and Miles were shown forcing Ezra underwater repeatedly. Their laughter echoed through the speakers. "Turn it off!" Mr. Peterson shouted, standing up. "This is edited footage!" "Sit down!" the judge ordered sharply. "Bailiff, remove anyone who interrupts again." The video continued, showing Ezra's desperate struggle for air. Then came footage from last night, 3 teenagers with weapons stalking toward a lone figure by the pool. The audio was crystal clear. "Time to learn your place, boy. Should have left town when we warned you. Nobody's going to believe you anyway." Mrs. Miles covered her face. Kevin slumped in his seat. Blake stared at the floor. Different camera angles captured every moment of the attack and Ezra's controlled defense. The timestamps were clearly visible. The weapons glinted under the pool lights. Danielle gripped Ezra's hand as they watched. Mr. Caleb stood tall, arms crossed, while the prosecutor's confidence visibly deflated. The final clip showed the original pool incident from another angle, catching Blake whispering to his friends, "My dad says these people need to know their place. Nobody can touch us in this town." Silence fell as the screen went dark. Judge Morgan removed her glasses slowly. "Mr. Turner," she said quietly, "do you wish to proceed with the state's case?" The prosecutor tugged at his collar. "Your Honor, that is, perhaps a brief recess to review this new evidence." "Your Honor." A man in an FBI windbreaker stood up from the back row. "The Bureau would like to request all evidence be preserved for our investigation into civil rights violations and obstruction of justice." Now the police chief looked ready to faint. The Bullies' parents huddled with their lawyers, whispering frantically. Judge Morgan raised her gavel. "This hearing is hereby—" The gavel cracked like thunder. "This hearing is dismissed with prejudice. All charges against Ezra Jones are dropped immediately." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into the conduct of all parties involved in this attempted frame-up." The courtroom erupted. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. Danielle pulled Ezra into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Caleb placed a steady hand on Ezra's shoulder, nodding with quiet pride. "Order, order in the court." The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm not finished." The room quieted, but tension crackled in the air. "Based on the evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges against Blakely Peterson, Kevin Price, Miles Cooper, and their parents for conspiracy, filing false police reports, and child endangerment." The Bullies' families jumped up in protest. Mr. Peterson's face turned purple. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" "Bailiff, remove Mr. Peterson," Judge Morgan ordered. "And Chief Turner, I suggest you remain in the building. The FBI will want to speak with you." The police chief slumped in his chair as 2 FBI agents approached him. More agents moved to block the exits, preventing the Bullies' families from leaving. Mrs. Turner from the PTA stood up in the gallery. "I knew those boys were lying. Ezra's a good kid. I've seen him help elderly neighbors with their groceries. He tutors my daughter in math," another parent called out. Never caused any trouble. More voices joined in. People who had stayed silent before were now speaking up. The tide of public opinion shifted visibly as neighbors and townspeople rallied around Ezra and his mother. "My son saw them spray painting that garage," someone shouted. "They've been terrorizing kids for years. The police ignored our complaints too." The prosecutor gathered his papers with trembling hands, avoiding everyone's eyes. One of the FBI agents approached him, badge extended. "Sir, we'll need to review all your case files involving these families." Ezra's lawyer smiled broadly, shaking hands with Mr. Caleb. That video evidence was perfectly timed. How did you get it? Sometimes justice needs a little help, Mr. Caleb replied quietly. And sometimes teenagers with phones are braver than adults with badges. In the gallery, several students from the pool stood up holding their phones. We recorded everything, a girl announced. We were scared to come forward before, but we couldn't let them hurt Ezra again. The judge watched it all with satisfaction. Mr. Jones, she called out. Ezra looked up. I want to apologize on behalf of this court for what you've endured. No child should face such treatment in our community. Thank you, Your Honor, Ezra said clearly, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Mrs. Jones, the judge continued, you should be proud of your son. He defended himself with remarkable restraint despite extreme provocation. Danielle wiped her eyes. His grandfather taught him well. Strength with control, power with purpose. The bailiff began clearing the courtroom, but people lingered to pat Ezra's back and shake his hand. Teachers, who had looked away now, approached with apologies. Neighbors offered support and home-cooked meals. Blake, Kevin, and Miles were led out a side door by FBI agents, their parents following under escort. The boys looked small now, their false confidence shattered. Kevin caught Ezra's eye and quickly looked away, shame written across his face. Outside, the courthouse steps had become a media circus. Cameras flashed, and reporters thrust microphones forward as Ezra emerged with his mother and Mr. Caleb. The FBI's lead agent stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphones. I'm Special Agent Danielle Clark, with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. We are announcing a federal investigation into multiple counts of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and child endangerment against local officials and private citizens of Orchard County. She held up a hand as questions flew. We have evidence of systematic harassment, attempted assault, and a coordinated effort to misuse the legal system to victimize a minor. Multiple arrests are pending. The Department of Justice takes hate crimes and civil rights violations extremely seriously. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras zoomed in on the police chief being led to a federal vehicle, his head bowed. Additionally, Agent Clark continued, we're investigating numerous allegations of similar incidents that were ignored or covered up by local authorities. Anyone with information should contact our task force immediately. A reporter raised her hand. What about the video showing the attempted drowning? Will those boys face charges? The juvenile suspects will be processed according to federal guidelines regarding hate crimes, Agent Clark replied. Their parents are being charged as adults for conspiracy and child endangerment, with potential sentences of up to 20 years if convicted. The crowd murmured as more FBI vehicles arrived. Agents led out Mr. Peterson in handcuffs, followed by the other parents. Their expensive suits and arrogant expressions couldn't hide their fear. Now, this case highlights the importance of standing up to systemic racism and abuse of power, Agent Clark concluded. The FBI thanks the brave witnesses who came forward. No one is above the law. More questions flew, but Ezra's lawyer guided him and his mother toward their car. Mr. Caleb walked beside them, keeping the cameras back. But Ezra paused at the bottom of the steps, turning to face the reporters. I just want to say something, he said quietly. The microphones swung toward him. My grandfather taught me that martial arts isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others with honor. I hope everyone learns from this, not just about fighting back, but about standing up for what's right. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Ezra had said his piece. He got into the car with his mother and Mr. Caleb, leaving the media frenzy behind as Agent Clark continued detailing the charges against those who had tried to destroy him. Cardboard boxes lined the Joneses' living room wall, each labeled in Danielle's neat handwriting. Ezra taped shut another box of books, his muscles aching from 3 days of packing. The house felt emptier now, but his heart felt full. Got another scholarship letter, Danielle called from the kitchen, waving an envelope, Her eyes sparkled with joy. "This one's from the Civil Rights Defense Fund. Full ride to any college you choose." Ezra smiled, remembering how Mr. Caleb had worked his connections, reaching out to organizations and advocacy groups. "That's the fourth one this week." "And the housing assistance came through," Danielle added, setting down a stack of papers. "A beautiful 3-bedroom apartment in Riverbend Heights. Safe neighborhood, great schools." She paused, touching the worn kitchen counter. "It's more than I ever dreamed we could have." A knock at the door made them both turn. Mr. Caleb entered carrying a box of donuts. "Thought you might need breakfast. Moving day is hungry work." "You're spoiling us," Danielle laughed, but she took a donut gratefully. "The moving truck will be here in an hour," Mr. Caleb said, settling into a kitchen chair. "But first, we need to talk about tonight." Ezra looked up from his packing. "What's happening tonight?" "The town council is holding a special meeting at the pool. They want to present you with something." "I don't know." Ezra hesitated. "We're leaving tomorrow. Maybe it's better to just go quietly." Mr. Caleb shook his head. "This isn't about you anymore, son. It's about everyone who comes after you. The whole town needs this." Danielle touched Ezra's arm. "He's right, baby. Sometimes healing needs a witness." The moving truck arrived right on schedule. Professional movers, paid for by a community fund, carefully loaded their belongings. Neighbors stopped by throughout the day, bringing food and well wishes. Even Mrs. Clark from the corner store, who had barely spoken to them before, brought homemade dumplings and tears of apology. By late afternoon, most of their belongings were loaded. Ezra stood in his empty bedroom, touching the wall where his martial arts trophies had hung. So much had changed in just a few weeks. "Ready?" Mr. Caleb appeared in the doorway. "It's almost time." They drove to Orchard Community Pool in Mr. Caleb's car. The parking lot was packed. People lined the fence holding candles despite the lingering daylight. A podium had been set up near the deep end where the attack had happened. Mayor Turner, no relation to the arrested families, stood at the microphone. "Welcome, everyone. We're here tonight to acknowledge a grave injustice and to honor someone who showed us the way forward." The crowd parted as Ezra walked through with his mother and Mr. Caleb. Faces showed shame, respect, determination. Several of his former teachers nodded tearfully. The students who had recorded the video waved from the bleachers. "Ezra Jones," the mayor continued, "demonstrated courage not just in defending himself, but in the dignity with which he faced prejudice and corruption. He helped expose long-standing problems in our community that we can no longer ignore." She gestured to a large plaque mounted on the pool's wall. "This plaque commemorates not just Ezra's stand against injustice, but our commitment that such acts will never be tolerated here again." The Orchard Pool will now require all staff to undergo anti-racism training. "We're establishing a civilian oversight committee for our police department, and we're creating a scholarship fund for minority students in honor of Ezra and his grandfather's legacy." Applause rippled through the crowd. Agent Clark stood near the back, nodding in approval. Several FBI agents remained in town, continuing their investigation into years of covered-up incidents. The mayor held up a framed certificate. "Ezra, please come forward." He walked to the podium, his steps steady. The setting sun painted the water gold behind him. "This is the first ever Orchard Medal of Courage," the mayor announced. "Awarded to those who stand up for justice, even when standing alone. You've taught us all what real strength looks like." Ezra accepted the medal, its weight solid in his hands. He looked out at the gathered faces, neighbors who had found their voices, students who had chosen truth over fear, adults learning to confront their own biases. "Thank you," he said simply. But courage isn't just about fighting back. It's about fighting for change. Every one of you who spoke up, who shared those videos, who demanded better from our leaders, you showed courage too. He turned to Mr. Caleb. "My grandfather taught me that martial arts is about more than self-defense. It's about protecting others, standing up for what's right. That's why I've decided to become an instructor myself someday. No kid should ever feel helpless against bullies or hate. Mr. Caleb beamed with pride. The crowd applauded again, longer this time. Parents hugged their children. Former adversaries shook hands. The water lapped peacefully against the pool's edge, washing away old shadows. The mayor stepped forward again. This is just the beginning of real change in Orchard. We have a long way to go, but thanks to Ezra, we know which direction to walk. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the water, Ezra stood with Mr. Caleb at the edge of the pool. The same spot where fear had once gripped him now felt like a place of power. "Your grandfather would be proud," Mr. Caleb said softly. "You didn't just defend yourself. You helped wake up a whole town." Ezra touched the metal, watching the last rays of sunlight glint off its surface. Tomorrow would bring a new home, new opportunities, new challenges. But tonight, standing beside his mentor as the community gathered to honor truth and justice, he felt his grandfather's spirit in every peaceful breath. The first morning in Riverbend Heights broke with a gentleness Ezra had almost forgotten the world could hold. Sunlight poured across the curtains of their new apartment, gilding the edges of the walls in quiet warmth. For the first time in months, he woke without the weight of dread pressing on his chest. His muscles still ached from the move, but the ache felt different now, earned, purposeful, like the soreness after a good training session. He lay there for a moment, listening. No broken glass at the window, no hateful words spray-painted on the garage door. Only the hum of traffic in the distance, the chirping of birds on the balcony rail, and the clatter of his mother in the kitchen. Normal sounds, safe sounds. "Ezra, breakfast!" Danielle's voice carried through the apartment, bright with something he hadn't heard in too long. Unguarded joy. He swung his legs out of bed, bare feet meeting polished hardwood instead of the threadbare carpet of Orchard. Boxes still lined the hallway, stacked neatly against the wall, but even their presence couldn't dull the sense of beginning. Each box held not just belongings, but proof that survival could be transformed into renewal. The kitchen smelled of scrambled eggs and coffee. Danielle stood at the counter in her new uniform. Nursing scrubs this time, not the diner apron. Her eyes were still shadowed with exhaustion, but hope burned there like a flame refusing to die. "Morning, baby," she said, placing a plate before him. "First day in our new place. Feels strange, doesn't it?" Ezra smiled. "Strange, but good. Like waking up in a dream you didn't think you deserved." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "You deserve all of it, more than all of it." For a few minutes, they ate in companionable silence. But beneath the quiet, Ezra felt the tug of yesterday's ceremony, of the medal that now rested in a velvet box atop his dresser. The Orchard Medal of Courage. The applause still echoed in his mind, not as noise, but as affirmation. For once, he hadn't been seen as a threat. He had been seen. After breakfast, he stepped onto the balcony. Riverbend Heights stretched before him, a neighborhood alive with laughter, the smell of bakeries down the street, and children racing on bicycles. No one crossed the street to avoid him. No one looked twice with suspicion. It wasn't paradise, but it was a place where tomorrow felt possible. Behind him, a familiar voice rumbled. "Taking it all in, son?" Ezra turned. Mr. Caleb leaned against the doorway, a paper bag in one hand, his ever-present wisdom in the other. He had insisted on helping them settle in, refusing to vanish just because the trial was over. Ezra grinned. "I thought you weren't coming until later. I couldn't resist bringing bagels. And besides, Mr. Caleb said, lowering himself into a chair, "You don't start a new chapter alone. That's not how stories work." Ezra laughed softly. "Feels like the last chapter finally closed." Mr. Caleb shook his head. "Not closed. Completed. There's a difference. Closure means something ended. Completion means something was built, a foundation. From there, you build higher." The words sank deep, like seeds planted in ready soil. Ezra thought of his grandfather's voice, the way it had guided him through water and fire alike. Strength with control. power with purpose. Those teachings lived in him now, no longer as memory, but as mission. Later that afternoon, they unpacked boxes together. Danielle arranged framed photos along the shelf. Ezra as a boy clutching his first martial arts certificate, a picture of her and her late father in front of their old dojo. And finally, a new image, Ezra at the orchard pool podium, metal shining against the setting sun. When she placed that one down, her hands trembled slightly. Every time I look at this, I'll remember that even in the darkest places, truth finds a way out. Ezra didn't answer at first. He traced the photo's edge with his fingertip. The faces in the crowd had been strangers and doubters once. But on that night, they had stood as witnesses to courage, to change. A knock sounded at the door. When Ezra opened it, 3 neighborhood kids stood there, awkward but determined. The oldest, a boy about 12, clutched a battered pair of boxing gloves. Mr. Caleb said you're a martial artist, the boy stammered. We heard what happened in Orchard. We were wondering, would you maybe teach us? Just, how to defend ourselves. Ezra blinked, taken aback. Then he glanced at Mr. Caleb, who stood watching with a knowing smile. The old man said nothing. He didn't need to. Ezra crouched to meet the kid's eyes. I can't promise to make you fighters, but I can show you what my grandfather showed me. How not to feel helpless. How to stand tall when the world tries to push you down. End of quote. The kids nodded eagerly, relief flickering across their young faces. They weren't asking for violence, they were asking for strength. Tomorrow, Ezra said. We'll start tomorrow. That evening, Danielle sat by the window, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond. Ezra joined her, the medal in his hand. Mom, he said quietly, we survived, but I don't want survival to be the end of the story. She looked at him, pride softening every line of her face. Then make the next part more than survival. Make it life. He slipped the medal back into its case. One day, I'll open a dojo, teach kids who feel like I did, that the world's against them. I'll show them they're not powerless, that they matter. Danielle leaned her head against his shoulder. Your grandfather would smile at that, and I'll be there in the front row cheering louder than anyone. They sat together in silence, watching headlights flow like rivers through the night. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was full of possibility. On the balcony later, Ezra breathed in the cool night air. Across the city, life pulsed, messy, uncertain, but alive. He thought of Orchard, of the pool's dark water, of the hands that had tried to drown him. He thought of the witnesses who had finally raised their phones, their voices. Pain had forged him. Injustice had tested him. But love, memory, and discipline had carried him. He whispered to the night as though his grandfather stood just beside him. I'm ready now, ready for whatever comes next. The city lights blinked back, as if in answer. And for the first time, in a long time, Ezra believed they truly did. The story of Ezra Jones does not end at the pool, nor in the courtroom, nor even on the day he received the Medal of Courage. Those were turning points, moments when the world finally looked and saw him not as a threat, not as a target, but as a young man standing tall in the face of hate. Yet the true measure of this journey lies not only in Ezra's victory, but in what it teaches all of us. For generations, voices like Ezra's have been silenced by fear, by lies, by systems that protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. What happened to him was not an isolated event. It was a reflection of what too often lingers beneath the surface. Prejudice disguised as order, cruelty masked as discipline, indifference defended as neutrality. And yet, Ezra's story reminds us that silence is never the final word. Truth has a way of breaking through, sometimes carried on the whistle of an old lifeguard, sometimes through the lens of a teenager's phone, sometimes in the simple act of refusing to bow to injustice. Courage is not found only in fists or kicks. Real courage lives in the decision to rise when the world tells you to stay down. It is in the way a boy chooses discipline over rage, dignity over despair. It is in a mother's steady voice when fear pounds at the door. It is in a community finally daring to admit that they turned away too long. Ezra's triumph is not the triumph of one, but of many who chose to stand, to record, to speak, to believe. And here is the lesson we cannot ignore. Justice is never automatic. It must be demanded, defended, protected, again and again. Systems change only when people force them to. Silence is what allows the cracks in our communities to widen. But when ordinary people find their voices, when they insist on truth over rumor, compassion over cruelty, dignity over domination, that is when change begins. Perhaps you have known an Ezra. Perhaps you have been Ezra, misjudged, cornered, fighting battles most people never see. If so, let this story remind you that your strength is not wasted, that your struggle is not invisible, and that your voice can light the way for others. And if you have stood by, silent in the crowd, let this story be a call to speak when it feels easier to look away, a call to protect the vulnerable, to raise your phone, your hand, your voice, whatever you have, when the powerful try to bury the truth. Because no community heals when it hides its wounds. It heals when it exposes them, cleans them, and chooses to grow stronger together. That is why Raw Black Stories exists. To tell the stories that too many dismiss. To breathe life into voices pushed to the margins. If this story moved you, if you felt anger, or hope, or even recognition, don't let the conversation stop here. Share your thoughts below. Tell us what you've seen, what you've lived, what lessons you take from Ezra's journey. Stories like his grow stronger when they are carried by many voices, not just one. And if you want to walk with us through the next story, if you believe that storytelling can spark change, then stay close. Subscribe to Raw Black Stories, not because the algorithm demands it, but because community demands it. Because every time you return, you help keep these stories alive. Ezra Jones stepped into his future with a medal in his hand and his grandfather's wisdom in his heart. The question is not what he will do with that gift. The question is what we will do with ours.